Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Deku become a magician part 2. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video and also share this video with your friends. I have created my other videos playlist, there you can watch my all videos easily, check out as well. Let's start this video. To say Inko was not happy when Izuku had gotten home was an understatement. Raising a son like Izuku had led her to pick up a few of his habits as well, one of which was a morbid curiosity with watching hero fights. For her, though, she prefers to watch from the safety of her home instead of on the front lines like her son. She only allowed him this because he swore he would never get involved in the fight and that he had to be there to get the full experience of quirks if he was going to study them. She also didn't mind seeing some of the more athletic heroes work. She would never admit that she had used the footage of some more masculine heroes as inspiration on particularly lonely nights. She was still an attractive woman and had a healthy libido. Not her fault many of the heroes look so good in spandex, but that is a story for Izuku's third year at UA, or why coming home unannounced for the weekend leads to a stern conversation on what socks on door handles mean, or as Izuku refers to it as reason number 103, he needs a therapist. So, imagine her surprise when she had received a very frantic phone call from her friend Mitsuki. Just because their sons are at odds doesn't mean she needs to lose the few friends she has too. It's hard to meet new people as a single mom. So a quick call where she spent much of it just trying to get her friend to speak slowly enough to understand, followed by turning on the television to see in a news broadcast how All Might had saved 2 young boys from a villain didn't seem to register. Beyond her swooning when All Might showed up, it was so paternal how he protected young children. Until the feed looped to show what happened before All Might arrived on the scene, where she saw a familiar head of yellow, causing a completely recognizable amount of destruction. Then her own panic attack as she watched a small green head run in, and swift motion she had seen practiced regularly. Her own idiot son, who she loved dearly, had broken the ultimate rule she had given him when it came to watching these hero fights. Knowing that she didn't need to plan her son's funeral because All Might had saved her son from being decapitated by an explosion, she instead started planning his funeral for when she killed him. The weather was improving, so she settled on a spring funeral. She always liked to see the cherry blossoms in bloom. However, she had to wait for when her son came home, and dinner time had passed quietly, with Inko sitting in a chair watching the front door for when her soon-to-be deceased child came home. Her face pulled into an almost demonic grin of sadistic glee when she heard her son outside the apartment door. Sure, him talking might have been strange, since she swore she could hear 2 voices, but that was chalked up to Izuku having one final muttering spree before he accepted his fate. So she patiently waited, a frying pan on her lap. She hadn't waited long as the doorknob slowly turned and Izuku cautiously peeked his head into the entryway. "It's really dark, Mom," said Izuku. Unsure why the light seemed to have been turned off this late in the evening and that he could hear no sounds from the apartment. "Mom, I'm home." Glancing around and not somehow missing the form sitting in a chair a few feet away from him. "I think she's gone, this could be good, maybe we can have this talk with her later, like tomorrow, or never." "Yeah, never is good, let's schedule it then." A flick of the light switch and Izuku's sudden realization that he was within 3 feet of his mother and didn't even know, so he did what any teenager does when they know they got busted doing something they shouldn't have. He screamed like a little girl and began begging for mercy. As Inko was about to waylay into her son and have a brand new idiot son-shaped dent in her favorite cooking implement, she noticed that her son had not returned home alone. Stopping herself from murdering her son in front of a witness, she decided to at the very least ascertain why this person was accompanying her son home. Taking in the sight of this man, he had very gaunt, almost sickly looking features. His clothes hung loose on his frame, which seemed to be consumed by the size of his suit, which was probably 8 or 9 sizes too big for him. His lips were pushed back into a grin, displaying an enormous jaw that a gigantic set of chompers. If he had some meat on him, he might not look so creepy, smiling like that. Then his eyes, Inko stopped, his eyes looked so tired, so full of pain and suffering, yet so very inviting and full of life. It wasn't until Izuku had stopped his pleas for mercy and noticed his mom staring at his guest that he got her attention back to him. Clearing his throat, Izuku turned to face his mother. "Mom, this is Mr. Toshinori," he gestured to All Might. "He is All Might's assistant and he has something he wants to tell you." Now the name All Might carries some great weight in the house. He was Izuku's positive male role model growing up, unknown where Hisashi was, so when she saw that he had taken to emulate the better-natured gentleman and developed a bit of a hero complex, if an obsession was a bit, and she wasn't going to try and dissuade him from that, it beats him turning into a delinquent who grew up without a father, like it turned out many villains had. So, upon hearing that this person had a connection to her son's idol, and more than a few imaginary trysts herself, she was willing to postpone her son's punishment until more information could be gathered. Collecting herself, she bowed graciously. "Please, Mr. Toshinori, won't you come in? I certainly hope my son hasn't done anything wrong." Bringing both of the men into her kitchen, she had begun making tea. It was only polite to offer to guests. The 2 plates of food untouched on the kitchen table did not go unnoticed by either of them. Inko was sure the best place to start was some light conversation before ascertaining what type of damage her son had gotten himself into. She loved him dearly. But over the years she came to understand that her son, if left unchecked, could get up to some considerably dangerous notions and actions. "So, my son says you work for All Might, how is that?" she inquired. Clearing his throat, unsure as he had expected to just speak to her about hiring Izuku for the 10 months between now and the entrance exam. He was not ready for the rather shapely woman to want to inquire about him. Maybe it's because he had no children of his own that he didn't think it necessary when underage boys came home with strange men to present wondrous job opportunities to their parents that they even get to know him. It was pretty common for some heroes to take young impressionable children under their tutelage without informing family members, at least before the government got involved in hiring practices. With a slight frown he remembered back to when Nana had just grabbed him and started training him, but some creep dressing up like a bat kidnaps a few young boys to train them in his cave, and suddenly it's frowned upon to just get a sidekick whenever you wanted. So, he handled this the way he knows how, by bumbling through the conversation like a prat. "Well, you see, Mrs. Midoriya, I mean All Might," he began, already earning a mental facepalm from Izuku. He was cut off suddenly with a short, "It's Ms. Midoriya," Inko had informed him. "Ahem, well, Ms. Midoriya," he said with maybe a little too much fervor that caused Izuku to raise an eyebrow in confusion. "I like working for All Might very much, with how often he is out stopping crime, catching villains, or saving children." He still had much paperwork to deal with running his agency, and mail, and other assorted daily affairs. "So much of my time is spent handling those such affairs in an office most of the day." The whistling of the kettle drew a pause in the conversation as Inko went to pour 2 cups. The sidelong glance from All Might as she reached up onto her toes into the cupboard to grab a few mugs had not gone unnoticed from the mother. She knew she still had it to turn heads. After adjusting his suit to fit him better as he sat in the kitchen and taking a sip of the tea to clear his throat, he again started speaking, which leads me to why I had accompanied young Midoriya home. After his incident earlier this evening, which you seem to be aware of considering I think young Midoriya's reaction to coming home indicated you don't normally greet him at the door with a blunt object. I had earlier just finished a meeting with All Might that I was falling behind on all that I had to attend to in his place, on my own, and that assistant to the assistant was needed in order to keep up, at least temporarily, as he, All Might, is going to begin a position as a member of faculty in the coming year at UA. Mentally thanking Nedzu for the flowering language on the many forms he needed to sign to become a faculty member at UA, it was proving very helpful in giving the impression he knew what he was talking about. As such, All Might had given me instructions to find a suitable person to hire for a temporary position at his agency, and when All Might saw how brave your son was trying to save his friend's life, he decided to do an impromptu interview with your son and myself, and we decided he would do very well filling in that position. All Might have explained to Inko. Now I came with him in place of All Might as he is very busy to ask for your permission as he is a minor, and we can't just go around abducting children to work with heroes anymore. He chuckled. "So, you say my son," gesturing to Izuku, who sheepishly waved at his mom, who frankly did the absolutely one thing I told him he was never supposed to do when it came to his hobby of hero watching. Her voice darkening, and All Might himself has decided to take my son to be an intern at his agency until he goes to teach at the most famous hero school in the world. Am I understanding you correctly? Yes, Ms. Midoriya, I knew you were a smart woman from what Izuku had told me about how he was never supposed to get involved with villains. Under his breath, could have also told me how attractive and single she was too, but yes, that is the general idea of the situation. Now I'm inclined to believe that my son has had a stroke of good fortune his way, heavens knows he deserves it, but what does he get out of this, besides the possibility of being around his idol for the duration of his internship? Izuku took this chance to speak up. I told All Might I want to be a hero, and he agreed to help train me to pass the UA entrance exam. Isn't that great? Not only do I have a quirk, but I can get trained by All Might to make it into the school of my dreams. Realizing what happened before getting attacked that day, he reaches into his backpack and pulls out the form from the principal. See, I even passed the mock exam, got a near perfect score too. Inko looked over the sheet, a smile growing on her face. Her son was making his dream his own, from his own hard work. And with All Might's direction, I should be able to pass the practical portion of the exam too. It was time for Izuku to use his secret technique. His mother had a pouty face that she used on him, so he in turn developed a set of puppy dog eyes of his own to use when he needed to get his way, and he had them firing full blast. Please, this is just what I need to guarantee getting into the school. I can finally be a hero, Mom. I have a quirk, I have a tutor, I have a chance. That's all I ever wanted." Her defenses crumble from this emotional assault. But there was one that could not be pierced by her son's tactics. Turning back to Toshinori, looking him dead in the eye, she had one question. Any faltering in answering this would lead to her all but throwing the man out of her home. Will my son be safe? Nothing would happen if her son could be put in danger. Under no circumstances will Izuku be put in a situation any person could call dangerous. Toshinori spoke with conviction. The absolute worst is that All Might will work your son to the bone to prepare him for the path he seems dead set on following. It will be tough, he will come home tired, sweaty, and covered in dirt at times, but he will never be in any danger. His safety will be my top priority. Inko gave him a once-over, waiting for him to flinch, to give any indication that he was anything but honest. She saw none, just a man who truly believed that he could provide something for her son that no one else had been able to do before. Though she looked him over a little longer, affirming again that Mr. Toshinori wasn't that bad looking. Glancing to Izuku, who started with a waiting gaze of confirmation. She nodded. Her son's excitement bubbling over as he did a little dance and cheered. He regained his composure when he realized both of the adults were staring at him. "Ahem, I'll go wash up if you need to speak to Mr. Toshinori some more." "That would be a good idea, Izuku. You had a long day and you will face your punishment in the morning, so don't think you got away with disobeying me." Izuku bowed as he left the room. "Sweetie, I just want you to know, I love you, and after what I saw you do today, I have never been more afraid in my life, but I also have never been prouder of the strong young man you are growing up to be." Inko talked with Yagi further into the night. They ironed out what times Izuku was to be with All Might and any other information he would need to begin his training. They devised a dietary plan that would work with her budget, supplemented with some pay that Izuku would be receiving for his work with Mr. Toshinori. A schedule to make sure he kept up on his schoolwork. Then the topics transitioned into their favorite foods, what type of movies they like, some stories from their childhood. All Might left that night with a new disciple to train, another to find to inherit his quirk, and a slip of paper with a phone number on it. He was having a good day. Izuku woke up the next morning, refreshed. He was on top of the world. He met his hero, fought a villain, saved his frenemy Kachin, and now he gets to spend time training with All Might to be a hero. So he might have forgotten how much trouble he was in with his mother, but after doing chores all weekend left him with an understanding that he wasn't to do something so reckless again. The training began the following week. Izuku had received a text from All Might to meet him at the beach near his apartment. It had been filled to the brim with garbage, so All Might had the brilliant idea to have him train his body moving the junk into the bed of a truck that All Might would drive to a dump to get rid of. Now he explained to Izuku that originally the plan was to have him clear the entire beach in 10 months to train his body to handle One for All's power, but since he isn't going to make that the requirement this time, instead Izuku will need to clear up most of the junk and set it around so that space could be cleared for use. Using the various objects Izuku would need to make space for him to practice his quirk and see what limits he had to what he could do and how to go beyond. So Izuku returned home many days sweaty, tired, and reeking of garbage, but he was making progress. By the end of his 3rd month, he had managed to lose most of his baby fat, leaving him with a rather slim swimmer's body. But All Might took that as the indication that Izuku was ready for the second step of his training. He had wanted Izuku to demonstrate his quirk to him and see how a healthier body might lead to his quirk being more impactful. So on Fridays, Izuku would put on impromptu magic shows for All Might, demonstrating some of the tricks he had learned. It for the most part amused All Might that Izuku had developed a hero persona so early into his career. Most heroes hadn't decided on a theme for their quirk, so Izuku dressing up as a magician was quite a sight to see. It didn't help that when Izuku would turn his back during the show, All Might would snap a few pictures to send to Inko, but it all came to a head during his 4th month of practice. All Might had been relaxing, since Izuku had just been moving some of the heavier objects, washers, dryers, refrigerators, until a resounding crash and a pained cry came from the other side of the pile. Worried, he rushed over to see a fridge had fallen from the top of the pile, and Izuku could not be seen. Frantically he lifted the appliance to see if his new charge had been simply squashed beneath the object. Worried about how he would explain this to the boy's mother, he was alarmed to not see the child pancake beneath the weight. He gazed into the fridge hoping to see the boy wedged into the open area, but it laid empty. He opened his mouth to call out for Izuku, hoping that the boy spontaneously developed a habit of pranking him in the last 5 minutes. Until he heard a rattling from the ground behind him. Curiously approaching the microwave on the ground, he pushed the button that would open the door, taken by surprise when Izuku crumpled out of the space. Gasping for air, the boy looked up to All Might's very worried, very confused face. "Well, I had to come out somewhere," was all he could get out before he collapsed on the ground. All this earned from All Might was a hearty laugh. This boy was sure to be the death of him. He knew at this moment, Izuku was ready for UA, but was the school ready for him? Into his 5th month he demonstrated some of his tricks with the endless kerchief, using it as a whip, controlling it like a snake, tying up All Might. But would admit that the kerchief, while not impossible to escape from, was definitely harder to get out of than he had assumed the multicolored cloth would be. Izuku was very proficient with the different ways to tie people as well, so All Might had him demonstrate how he would tie people based on their quirks, since just putting people's hands behind them would do a fat lot of good for a great many quirks. Since most emitter-type quirk users tended to use their hands, Izuku had taken it on himself to practice tie-ups that would place the hands under the chin of the person trapped, so that any attempt to use their quirk to escape would result in them blasting their own face off. In his 6th month, All Might informed him that maybe he should practice super moves, telling him that normally students at UA didn't work on those until at the earliest their 2nd semester, but that giving him a head start wouldn't be an unfair advantage. So Izuku turned to his trunk on the weekends to look over his props and tools. Taking in the tools he had, he decided that he would try to make something of his most offensive tool, his deck of cards. He practiced with them in forming various weapons, but he never considered that to be much of a super move, so instead he thought back to when he fought the sludge villain, when he used his levitation to move the cards inside the slime, so he created his first super move, Card Guard. By swirling the 52 cards at high speeds, spinning, and rotating them around him, they created a fairly effective defense against thrown objects and projectiles, intercepting, and even cutting through sheet metal that All Might would toss at him, at reasonable speeds of course. So Izuku turned one of his greatest weapons into a shield. All Might was surprisingly strict about what tricks he was allowed to practice after having a discussion with Inko about some of his more death-defying stunts. So All Might had to watch out if he started edging a little too close to the water, or if he seemed to have found a bunch of knives. It was relatively uneventful until Izuku asked All Might to lock him in a fridge, or since they couldn't find anything to tie up the fridge, if he would just hold the door closed, and Izuku would try to escape. After 5 minutes All Might got worried that Izuku had run out of air. After finding the fridge empty, and Izuku had come around the corner with a bag of chips from the convenience store down the way, he may or may not have tossed the young boy into the ocean for his antics. At last the 10th month had passed, Izuku had managed to shed all but the last of his body fat, growing some lean muscle. He looked quite athletic, but now came the important date. The entrance exam. Izuku had tried to get All Might to spill the beans about what he was walking into, but All Might was surprisingly tight-lipped about that aspect of the school, said he didn't want to take away the magic, but Izuku was confused when he had to fill out a few extra forms when he got to the school, asking about his quirk and if he wanted to enter under a utility, rescue or combat test. After reading the short description of what was expected in each different choice, he wasn't sure, but since he had been training with All Might and had even had 2 fights with a villain, he decided he shouldn't have too much trouble with a combat test. The day started with the easiest portion, the timed written exam. They had 90 minutes to complete. Izuku only needed 15. He wasn't the first done. Kachin, a boy with blue hair, one with bicolored hair, and a very attractive girl with long black hair done in a ponytail had all finished before him. That 5th was pretty good. So he spent the remaining 75 minutes taking in the other students. Some he could see what quirks they had, just because of how their body looked. That was one of the disadvantages he could see of mutant-type quirks. You couldn't hide much from your opponent. And so he began to categorize the quirks he could see. A large boy with a face mask and what looked like large webbed arms was writing in his test. As Izuku had turned his in, he wasn't worried about getting accused of cheating. He noticed a set of floating clothes that at first made him wonder if someone was using telekinesis to play a joke, until he realized that the person, and from the manner of dress, a girl, was actually invisible. Another girl sat in vibrant pink skin. From her demeanor he could tell she was struggling with the test, along with a few other students. Another girl with bull horns and what looked like horse hooves seemed to have a book out, unsure if that was cheating, but no one seemed to question it. Craning himself to perhaps see more, he understood it as a Japanese-English dictionary, so she was a foreigner. Unfortunately, Kachin was sitting next to him, and the last few people who had caught his gaze were female test takers, so that earned a quick yank to his seat. If you think you can just perv on all the girls this year, just because no one knows your worthless ass, be ready for me to knock you off your high horse, you Houdini wannabe. Unused to being called a pervert, this got Izuku to defensively wave his hands, and then no, Kachin, it's not Lee like that, I was just admiring their quirks. His face turned a bright shade of red. Yeah sure, and I'm just looking out for your reputation, he quickly retorted. This exchange earned a harsh shushing from the blue-haired boy. If you two are just here to distract people who are taking their test, you should leave and not disgrace this school any further. With what would be called saint-like restraint, Kitsuki managed to not fling himself over 3 rows of students to pummel the person who dared to shush him. Only his mother does that, and he still fights back when she does. Shut up, loser, and worry about yourself. Not going to waste time with extras like you who probably got here because he's a stuck-up know-it-all. Izuku turned away from the 2 feuding teenagers. As more and more students finished the test, there were small groups of students chattering with each other. The proctor, present Mick, with a quirk that let him make a cacophony of noise, surprisingly had sharp hearing, so he could tell the discussions were not about the test itself, and most takers were just getting to know the person in proximity to them. He did shush a few groups who were getting a little louder, so it helped to relax the room to know that he wasn't terribly strict after they had finished their test. Izuku had turned to the person on his left, as Kacchan didn't seem to focus on him, since he had set his sights on sending vaguely disguised death threats at the tall boy, who in turn started quoting school regulations and waving his arm like a robot at him. As a rare outsider to Kacchan's ire, it looked oddly cute to see him so worked up over something so insignificant, but that was Kacchan, had to always be the best, so everything was a competition to him. Even first impressions with strangers. Noticing that the girl to his left hand finished a few minutes ago, he introduced himself. "Hi, I'm Izuku Midoriya, what's your name?" Extending his hand to hers. The orange-haired girl pushed a few strands out of her face. "My name is Itsuka Kendo." She took him in her hand, and Izuku was suddenly aware that her hands were gigantic. She realized this, and promptly hid them between her thighs. "Sorry, when I'm nervous sometimes I can't control my quirk completely." The light laugh Izuku let out. "It's okay, I'm a professional when it comes to being nervous. If I didn't have my power, I'd say inducing mild panic attacks was my quirk." A little humor and confidence is something he had picked up spending so much time around All Might. How could you not? He told so many jokes and just oozed confidence, so Izuku was glad that it seemed infection. Because he got a giggle from the young lass, which he found very cute. "Thanks, that helped calm me a little." She placed both of her hands on her lap, considerably smaller this time. "So you finished in 15 minutes, you must have either studied really hard or you're really smart." Placing a hand on the back of his neck, rubbing, Izuku sputtered out his reply. Well, I did a lot of studying in my free time." Kacchan is someone who's really smart. He spends more time practicing his quirk than reading a book, because he thinks practical knowledge is better than being a nerd. Hearing his name used, he quickly turned, assessed what was spoken, and belted out a quick, "Yeah, better than being a shitty nerd." Only to turn back to the blue-haired boy who is now reprimanding him for his use of language. Eating another cute giggle from Itsuka, Izuku returned to the conversation. "Yeah, him, before you ask. Yes, we grew up together. He's really nice underneath that rough exterior." "He's about as rough as barbed wire," she retorted. This time Izuku suppressed a snort as he imaged it in his head. He found himself at ease with speaking to Itsuka. "So, what did you sign up for, utility, rescue or combat?" he asked. "Well, my quirk lets me make my hands bigger, so I trained with my parents to learn a martial art." She then took the time to take in the figure of the boy sitting next to her. He seemed to be wearing a suit, a tuxedo to be more specific. A brief glance around the room, and it was apparent to her that he was either overdressed or everyone else was underdressed. "So do you always wear a suit when you go out, or did you just get let go from prom?" she chided the young boy. After a brief flash of pink on his cheeks from the teasing, Izuku had pieced together a response. "Well, to be honest, I figured I wouldn't be the only one. So many people's quirks can work much better with even just a different set of clothes. I expected more people to bring items that help their quirk or could be used in conjunction with them to help pass the practical. I didn't know the rules allowed that," was her response. "Well, they don't explicitly state you can, but they don't explicitly forbid it either, so I figured it was one of those hidden rules. If you were clever enough to figure out that there was more to these tests than just what was presented, you could do better, and I figured you could bring gadgets, tools, and even weapons to help you pass the test. I mean, no quirk can do everything." "Wow, you're really observant. What happens if they say you can't use stuff? I figure your clothes aren't the only thing you brought." With a wink, "Though the suit cuts a fine figure on you, did you get it tailored?" "Well, if I can't use anything I brought with me, then I'll have to change up my act on the fly, which may be a bit difficult since I practiced my act using my props, but I think since the combat has us fighting faculty." Pausing for a second, which confuses me since I had heard from a reliable source that the previous years had the students just smash a bunch of expensive robots, but that wouldn't be fair to kids who don't have combat-oriented quirks. Izuku began muttering to himself about what would cause the school to drastically change their position on entrance so quickly. The light tap on the head from an oversized hand brought him back to reality. "Oh good, I thought we lost you there for a minute. What was that about?" Rubbing his head, "Sorry, it's a bad habit I picked up. I get like that when I have a lot to think about, but well, I just thought it odd they decided to change it is all, and no, the suit isn't tailored." It's magic. He beamed. Another cute giggle. Oh, you are just too much, magic. Now I see it, you got a theme going, I can't wait to see what you do. So, I said what I was doing, and a little about my quirk, so it's your turn to be my sorcerer's apprentice. A large grin. Well, I decided to go combat. I already have some experience from training for almost a year with a pro, and have already fought a real villain twice. I didn't beat the villain, but I helped. What? You've fought a villain before? A little louder than she intended, earning a shush from Present Mick and vicious glare from Kachin. The only thing preventing him from tearing Izuku a new asshole for bragging about getting in the way of his fight with that slimeball was that the boy with glasses had taken to insisting that Bakugo's hair was in no way up to regulation and that he would need a proper trim if his quirk had nothing to do with hair. Not one to let someone diss his style, he doubled down and started insulting the boy's glasses as out of date and making him look like a giant nerd. Sorry, but you fought a villain twice. That's amazing. My parents would have grounded me forever if I fought not one, but two villains before I even entered a hero school. She grew excited. You got to tell me everything. Her gaze completely fixated on the green-haired boy. Unbeknownst to few other students who heard her outcry, had also taken the initiative to eavesdrop on this conversation. Not many people could claim this early in their career, to have fought real villains, or to a lesser extent get training from a pro, beyond the kids of pros themselves. So, a crow-headed boy, a frog girl, a boy with flat blonde hair, and another girl who had vines for hair listened intently. This young unassuming child might be the one to take pointers from if he was that smart and powerful already in his life. Well, it wasn't much. Do you remember about a year ago that slime villain who took a kid hostage and was blowing up a marketplace? Izuku inquired. Her nod, and the nods from other students who had turned to listen to his tale, left him a bit confused. Not many people usually wanted to hear what he had to say, so he composed himself and began again. Well, that was actually the second time I fought that guy. I was walking home that day when I stopped in an underpass to practice my quirk. I know the laws say we can't use our quirks in public, but that didn't make sense that I couldn't practice, so I made sure I did it out of the way of pedestrians and other people, in case you know. Another acknowledging nod. Most people were aware that it was against the law to use quirks in public, but everyone knew kids were using and practicing them. In out-of-the-way places too, unless some real damage was done, the police were reluctant to interfere in what they deemed as harmless experimenting and learning boundaries, so it was a societal nod that everyone just turned a blind eye to this usage. While I was in the underpass when he climbed out of a storm drain and tried to pull me into him, he said some really creepy things, like he was going to push all my organs out and wear me like a suit. It was really gross, but I had a deck of cards on me to make a sword and started cutting him whenever he tried to grab me. Itsuka raised her eyebrow. A quirk that let her use cards as a sword sounded really specific, but she kept her thoughts to herself until he finished his story. She was polite enough to wait until the end to ask questions. I didn't realize that the pieces I was cutting off formed a wall behind me until I literally stepped in it. He pulled me into his main body, and I couldn't grab anything to use to get out, and I almost drowned in him, mentally adding, even swallowed some of his gross elf. Had to eat some laxatives to feel sure he wasn't still there. Reinstating eye contact with Itsuka, but you'd never guess what happened. Honestly, if I wasn't there at the time, I wouldn't have believed it either. The villain had been running from a hero, and that's why he needed a disguise. Finally, the hero who had chased him through the sewers had caught up, and it was none other than All Might, and with one punch he splattered the villain into puddles. It was so cool. This put the students listening into awe. It's not every day you meet the number one, let alone get saved by him, but this raised further questions. If All Might had caught the villain, how it came to take a hostage and cause more damage, only to be caught again. Seemed like poor writing in a fictional story than real-life events. As if he possessed telepathy, Izuku answered their thoughts. So I did what any fanboy would do after meeting their idol. I bombarded him with questions and requests for autographs. He started chuckling along with everyone else, the bird-headed boy sounding shockingly close to a clucking chicken. This only made him more curious about the raven. So after having a bit of a fangasm, I just started to talk to him, and he is really easy to talk to. You wouldn't think it, but the guy is really corny. It's great. Unnoticed to everyone, their proctor had pulled up his jacket to hide the growing smirk. So this is the boy that All Might had spent his time training, he muttered to himself. All Might had let it known that he spent some time training a kid to help him prepare for UA at a meeting discussing the changes to the entrance exam. And as tradition, it seemed that Nedzu had been aware of this for some time and only reminded him not to give away what was happening behind the scenes. Wouldn't want anyone to have an unfair advantage, but he knew that from what the kid was saying he was the one. After one conversation with All Might, in either form you could tell that he was very much a goofball. So he decided to take a more vested interest in this tale than he had in making sure students weren't cheating. Not that he had much to worry about, there were only a few left, namely a boy with blonde hair with a black streak, a pink girl, and the girl who kept looking back and forth to the book. When she showed it was a simple dictionary and that it was allowed under the school's accommodating supplies, it seemed that the only reason that she hadn't finished was that she kept having to return to the book to get a definition from some of the more precise language. Returning to Izuku and his group of slowly ever-growing listeners. So after talking with him for a bit, it seems I had distracted him, and he didn't realize that the villain he had put in soda bottles wasn't as secure as he had meant it to be. So he must have fallen out of his pocket when All Might did that thing where he hurls himself across the city. A few nods of understanding that this almost flight was the hero's preferred method of transportation. So I was walking home when I saw an explosion. The frog girl was a bit less patient than the others it seemed, so you just ran over to the explosion, Kiro. Began rubbing the back of his neck from the sheer bluntness of what was probably a very stupid thing to do. Yeah, well, I'm used to explosions. He could tell from the wide eyes that he needed to explain, pointing behind him. I grew up around Kachin, and he sweats nitroglycerin. This acknowledgement only got a small insult from his blonde friend. Shut up nerd, at least my quirk is cool unlike your telekinesis. As for you Four Eyes, if my hair is against regulation, your blue top has to be as well. A small chuckle, and Izuku was back to his story, so I get there, and I see the only person I know who can cause a small catastrophe and just walk it off, trapped in the slime. He's really strong enough to not have been taken over by a villain. I didn't last a minute against him, but Kachin had to have been fighting him for at least 5. It was 10, and I had him on the ropes. You didn't need to interfere. Yeah, you had him right where you wanted him, suffocating on his gross body. Shut up. He was gross though. Ugh yeah, I blew up some green jello every day for a week because of him. Mom got mad at the mess I was making. Didn't care what the old hag wanted, and Bluebell, you better not be talking about my shoes. What are those? So, after doing what I did, All Might shows up again and thwarts the villain with a single punch. It was so cool. It was really stupid to run in. I should have left it to a pro, but they were just standing around. So I got in trouble for what I did with my mom. Itsuka had waited until Izuku had finished his tale, so you fought the same villain twice and got saved by All Might twice. A quick nod from Izuku confirming, that's crazy. That's bullshit, came a very condescending voice from the blonde boy who had been listening. So you just happened to fight the same villain twice in one day, and all because you distracted All Might, the #1 hero, from properly disposing of a piece of garbage. What's next now? You say that All Might decided to train you himself. PFT, what a liar. I'm not lying. Izuku had started to defend himself, only to be interrupted by the voice of the proctor. Pencils down, everyone that didn't finish, put your paper on my desk, and may the gods have mercy on your soul, he evilly laughed. All young listeners, now we will all orderly head to the testing grounds, and you'll be broken up into groups based on what you wanted to be tested on. Leading the teenagers into a large stadium. It seemed to have been prepared for just about any situation. Taking in a large breath to start his introduction, Present Might suddenly found himself rooted to the floor by concrete. The pro hero Cementus had decided now was the time to take the spotlight from his more boisterous peer. Welcome young students to Gym Gamma. In here I will be able to make just about any situation needed to test your potential. So now we will break you all up into groups. Would the combat test takers please head in the direction of Eraserhead and Midnight? A quick glance by many students to see what looked like a homeless man standing next to a very attractive woman dressed in a very tight bodysuit. A few of the male students and some female students were either very excited to go that way or disappointed they weren't. Next will the rescue students head towards Recovery Girl, Ectoplasm, and 13. A few of the students perked their heads up. These were well-known heroes in their respective fields, so the students with quirks suited to rescue were very pleased. Lastly will the students in utility will follow myself, and we will work with Power Loader and Hound Dog. So Izuku had walked over with Itsuka, with Kachin taking the front of the pack, or at least trying to. The blue-haired boy had taken it upon himself to try and lead the group in an orderly fashion, much to the chagrin of the other students, as they didn't elect him their leader. Glancing around he saw the pink-skinned girl, the bicolored boy, a boy with big lips, a boy with spiky red hair and shark teeth, and another boy with silver hair and shark teeth, and the blonde boy with a black streak. A few others had joined in, which made it the largest group. Izuku realized this also made it the hardest to pass in with so many to choose from. Simply meaning you had to be on top of your game if you wanted to secure your spot in the course. The homeless-looking man, identified as Eraserhead, spoke up with a deep gravelly voice, sounding like he hadn't slept in weeks. So you all are here for the combat, okay. So we are going to break you up into 2, it was 3, but a certain fool had run out the clock and now we have to do his work again. So to make sure it goes smoothly, you are all going to be testing yourself in combat against either one of us. We will separate you into 2 lines. You will have to battle for either 1 minute or until either we or yourself are incapacitated. Ugh, you say the rest, let's get this over with. The very buxom woman then took center, her figure getting most everyone's attention. Mentally to herself she knew some who weren't going to do well if they were this easily distracted. To continue what that big meanie was saying, earning a grumble from her colleague, you will have to battle and demonstrate that you have what it takes to use your quirk in a way to fight villains, but since we are experienced professionals, it wouldn't be fair if we kicked you out for not beating us, so it's not a requirement to beat either of us, but do try. I like my prospects to have a bit of a fight to them. She winked. This riled up a few of the students. So because my colleague has graciously agreed to what I say because I won a bet, I will now be the one to get the honor of dividing you sweeties up. So when I say your name you get to go and harass Eraserhead-kun, Todoroki, Kaminari, Bakugo, Tetsutetsu, Kirishima, Iida, Sato. As the lines started to form, it became aware that she was sending most of the boys to go and combat Eraserhead, much to the disappointment of some of the gentlemen, until the lines would be almost equal. Until Izuku had a sudden realization he was the only boy that she didn't send over. This made him now hyper-aware that all but 2 of the boys were now glaring at him, clearly wishing great harm on him. Kachin was glaring at him, but for a different reason. This prompted a response from Eraserhead. Why keep the shrimp? Oh, it's easy, look at him, he's all dressed up in his little tuxedo, and he looks like a magician, and he's so cute, putting some heavy emphasis on the cute. He could almost feel the boys' gazes trying to literally set him on fire with their anger, and I love cute little boys the most. Suddenly some of the girls were now giving him death-like glares. This went completely unnoticed to Izuku as he was now so red in the face you could replace his head with a tomato, and it would look the same. Now muttering about how it was just his costume, and how he didn't mean to be cute, and other means of denial. Causing Midnight to start a raucous laugh. Oh, you are so sweet, I am going to save you for last, and really savor it. To Izuku it seemed she was now intentionally trying to see if he could have even more blood to rush to his head in an attempt to see if he could in fact pop from the pressure. Across the building you could hear a cry of anger and frustration, and if you could see that far a very short purple-headed boy was frothing at the mouth. Itsuka managed to shake Izuku back to reality long enough to get him to distract himself with some mental preparation. She's just trying to get in your head, and to be honest, you are dressed really cute and it's funny to see you react to teasing like that, but you are here to be a hero. So get your head in the game and put on a good show. I really want to see what you can do after you get me so hyped up. This little pep talk was enough to get Izuku to begin his meditation. He didn't sit on the floor as he would at home, this didn't seem the place, but it was enough that he could recite some of his prepared words. The boys went by very quickly against Eraserhead. Izuku was aware of what his quirk was, erasure. As long as he looked at you, he could cancel your quirk. So the first person to go was Todoroki, much to Bakugo's protest that he should have first dibs to wipe the floor with this unshaved excuse for a teacher. Let's say after Todoroki found himself unable to use his quirk, he didn't last long in a fist fight against Eraserhead. However, anyone could tell the boy had some formal training as he had adopted a strict karate kata to defend himself, but he was clearly not prepared for such a sudden onslaught. Most of the boys didn't last long after throwing themselves at him. The only ones who managed a time longer than 20 seconds were Todoroki, Iida, and Kitsuki, the 2 former, because they had some formal combat training, which came from being sons of pro-hero families, as Eraserhead was aware. However, Bakugo caught him off guard a few times. Not many people with such an offensive quirk were that capable of close quarters combat, and this boy didn't fight with discipline, but like a rabid dog, taking a full 43 seconds to subdue all because he made a mistake and misjudged the scarves that had wrapped themselves around him. As for Midnight, most of the girls were unprepared for the sudden assault of a high-speed whip and wound up very much tied up very quickly. Ashido lasted some time after melting through the whip until she suddenly fell over asleep. Izuku, aware that Ms. Midnight's quirk, Somnambulist, allowed her to release pheromones that induced sleep. Izuku would have to be careful to not get knocked out like that. So when it came to his turn, he was prepared for some moderate flirting from the older woman of questionable age. As the last person to battle, he had quite the audience as most people stayed to watch how other students fared. Some left early, the bicolored boy one of them. Oh my cute little magician, pretend Midnight, I am so excited to see what tricks you have to show me, but I just have one question. Where is the top hat? It really is needed to complete the ensemble. Reaching to feel the top of his head, he realized he forgot his hat. This caused a few of the other test takers to laugh. Taking in a deep breath, mentally, it's showtime. Oh my dear, I seem to have misplaced it. Well, that won't do at all. His sudden shift in demeanor to one of a showman catching the attention of everyone else. How could I be so forgetful? Well, let me correct this mistake. pulling out the wand, and with a toss in the air catching it in his right hand, and with a tap of his left, the top of the hat popped out of the wand, a quick spin, and suddenly he had his hat. A few of the girls clapped at the trick. Bakugo gave a curt exhale of disapproval. Oh well, now I seem to be out of a wand. What magician is without a wand? Getting a few more gasps as he shoves his arm up to his shoulder into the newly formed hat. Rummaging around for a brief moment, he pulled a second wand out. A fluid toss of the hat for it to land on his head. I'm ready whenever you are, my lovely assistant. With a full bow and tipping of his hat to Midnight. Oh, you were going to be fun. I knew it was the best to save you for last. Most of the other students had finished their test, so had come over to the combat tests. Seeing a show was beginning to start, more students and a few teachers began to take an interest in the bout. Overconfidence was common among the test takers, but this didn't look to be that. Young Izuku looked like this was nothing more than a sure thing. That was because he was here and he had already won. The lightning flash flick of her whip hurtled towards Izuku's wand hand, suddenly stopping as the whip was caught in the air by a sequence of scarves tied together as they came from his left wrist. Oh, I'm sorry my dear, I wasn't aware you were the type of woman to want to touch whips this early in meeting someone. How scandalous. In faux shock as he gave a quick yank on his kerchief, to which became like steel, levitating in the air, he let go as Midnight's whip, unable to escape from the slowly curling scarves as they snaked their way up toward her. Realizing that it would be better to engage the child in close combat, she quickly closed the gap and delivered a swift kick to his abdomen. Unfortunately, it was a very telegraphed move, so Izuku had plenty of time to use his cloak as a means to rebound the attack. So Midnight switched up her style, moving around and going for an aerial attack. Everyone bar Katsuki was shocked when her heel kick stomped the cloak straight into the ground, as if no one had been there a moment ago. Lifting it to inspect on the chance that she had turned the student into paste, unaware that the hat Izuku had been wearing was unnoticed behind her. Only the sound of clapping caught the attention of the audience. Well done, that almost hit me, but remember, a magician is a master of escape. You'll have to try a bit harder to get me than you are now. Gloating. Izuku wondered why he was gloating. He had only done that before with the slime villain. Why was he now showboating? Was it because of the crowd, or did he just really want to impress Midnight? This lapse in thought left him open for her to invade his personal space and deliver a quick jab to his gut. Had Izuku not trained with all might, that might have been the end of Izuku's trial and would have blacked out from the pain. It was a well-placed strike to his solar plexus. Pushing himself back to gain some space that she just wasn't willing to give him, Izuku resorted to the deck of cards that he had in his pocket. Quickly forming them into rapier, he began jabbing, riposting, parrying and dodging her assault. From the outside it looks like she was overwhelming him, but they both knew this was a simple but beautiful waltz between them. Only further enticing her to want more of the young lad, she began to speed up, to which Izuku slowly began backing away, but she didn't follow the rapier he had left there defending all by itself as it floated in the air. Turning to the students, he gave a quick bow. This however set off Midnight. Her 60 seconds were almost up, and she was not going to be the first one to lose to a student, so she gripped the cloth on her arm and ripped a big hole to begin releasing her quirk on the boy. Which is exactly what he was waiting for. Seeing that the pheromone was based on smell, he broke the rapier up into the individual cards, and using his practiced super move, Card Guard, he began swirling them around, rapidly like a giant fan, pushing the pheromone onto the crowd. Realizing she had just put the other contestants to sleep all over the gym, she quickly stopped using her quirk, as the only people still conscious were Eraserhead, herself, and Izuku. Just as the timer reaches 0, Izuku quickly closed the gap between them, unsheathing his wand and stabbing it toward her face. Unprepared for the sudden movement, she waited for him to strike her. Until he didn't, the wand as he moved it toward her had transformed into a single red rose, which he presented on his knees. A beautiful rose for a beautiful assistant. I would love nothing more than to continue our dance with each other at a later date. He continued as he strolled away, snatching his hat and cloak from the ground, the kerchief slowly winding up his leg. However, next time, let me be the one to put people to sleep. It is the magician's job after all. With a hearty laugh, he had left Midnight standing on the mat, blushing profusely as the young man had exceeded every one of her expectations. Quickly realizing that the other people were still asleep, she began to wake them up. When Eraserhead walked up to her. Namuri, I want you to know that at 4 times in that fight with that student, I tried to erase his quirk. Not a single time did it stop anything that he was doing. Izawa, you tried to interfere. Namuri was shocked that Izawa was admitting to taking an interest in the boy as well, enough to see what he would do when he suddenly lost the ability to use his quirk. I'm amazed you were that interested in the boy. Normally my quirk can erase quite a number, but what I saw that boy do, either he has a dozen quirks or something completely different. I want him in my class. He all but demanded. Not fair, all the good ones get put in your hero course while I'm stuck with the Gen Ed students. She pouted. At least send him my way a few times, I love cute boys, especially if they got style like him. You're a walking lawsuit, you know that. Only if I get caught or they kiss and tell. I am here, what did I miss? The sudden boisterous voice of Japan's #1 hero as he entered the gym, only to see all but a few people asleep. A slumber party, what a novel idea. Both Eraserhead and Midnight had a few questions for the gigantic man. Where did you find this kid? What are you teaching him? What is his quirk? All Might was aware he had a long discussion coming with some faculty who were probably not going to believe the explanation Izuku had given him and stuck by. Over the months they were training together, he had tried to ascertain the real story, but it never changed. What was apparent was that Izuku had made a wonderful first impression on the teachers. The wait for the letter of acceptance was surprisingly easy for Izuku. His mother was frantically cleaning everything in the apartment for the third time this week. Izuku had assured her that he made a very memorable first impression, but his mother was not dissuaded. She saw how much effort her son had put into his dream, and if she was being honest, she joined him for his jogs on the weekend. She also changed her diet as well, so that she was eating healthier, since she knew it was easier to stick to a diet and exercise if the people you lived with were doing it with you, so she noticed she had dropped a couple of dress sizes. She wasn't back to her figure when Izuku was a little child, but she did recognize that hungry look in Mr. Toshinori's eyes when she would bend over to pick things up around him. Sure, she could do it with a little less flourish, but she enjoyed the attention she was getting. It came as a surprise one day when instead of a small letter a giant packet of forms came. Opening a diskette had fallen out, pressing play, an image shimmered into view on the holographic projection. Greetings new student, am I a mouse, a dog or a bear? My real identity is your new principal. Thank you for attending the entrance exam of your choosing. It is with great pleasure that I can add you to the ranks of fellow heroes who have passed through these halls. In previous years we just sent out a message from one of the teachers congratulating the student on passing. However, this year we had some changes due to recent developments in quality control. So enclosed is a packet with some changes and explanations to why we need to make adjustments. This information was already delivered to the second and third year students, so only the new incoming students will need to read this before the first day. We hope to see you grow into great heroes at our school and are pleased to announce that UA will be your hero academia. End of transmission. The EEC Inko squealed out, you did it, you got into UA. Oh, I have to go call Mitsuki, I have to call my boss, I have to call Yagi-san. She flitted about the room looking for the phone. Izuku just stared at the disc that had given him the news he had waited 2 weeks for. After taking a minute to process the information, he took a deep breath and asked his mother a question he had been waiting a long time to ask. Mom, could we call Dad too? His voice petered out at the end. The simple question was all it took to stop her in her tracks. She knew this day would come, she knew it would be something she would eventually have to tell her son. He was a smart boy and could see through the lies. He knew the truth even without her telling him, but he needed to hear it from her. Even if it would break his heart, she had hoped it would be far in the future, when he had found a nice woman of his own, settled down, and she may be on her deathbed, but it was now. The ugly past rises up to strike the brilliant future as if to say, you don't deserve to be happy. She had a choice to make, lie to his face again, and he would drop it, hurting their relationship, or tell him, and try to pick up the pieces again. Damn it Hisashi, she whispered through gritted teeth, it's not fair. Mom, it's fine, you don't have to. He lied, he knew he wanted to hear it from her, that it would hurt so much, but he believed he was ready, he could take the news, his father wasn't coming back. Izuku, your father, Hisashi Inko began, the words catching in her throat. Stealing her nerves for the first time in many years. When you were 4, after you were diagnosed. He got angry, yelling, and screaming about you being worthless. That something was wrong with you, that you were broken, that I was broken for making you. So, he just left. Tears flowing from her face, she couldn't even look her son in the eye, with how disgusted she felt letting the words come out of her mouth. She knew it was killing him to hear that his father left because of him. She only prayed to whatever God had seen fit to give her son, her darling baby boy, hope to not let him lose it now. Only her quiet sobs and a deep ragged breathing could be heard. She had clenched her eyes in expectation of Izuku having a meltdown, that Hisashi, his father, gave up on him, and her because he had no quirk. She waited patiently, however the one reaction she wasn't ready for was to be pulled into a tight embrace. His voice cracked, and the emotions that had dammed themselves behind the years of denial came forth in a torrent. Mom, it's not your fault. Please don't think that, I could never blame you. You have been the best mom I could ever hope to ask for. I love you so much. You never gave up on me, and now I have a chance to show everyone, to show him how wrong he was. Izuku pulled her back by her shoulders so she could see into his eyes, almost frightened by the fire in them, something she hadn't seen since his first declaration to be a hero. That man didn't want to be with a mom who was as awesome as you, he didn't want to see you or I grow up into the strong people we are today. So, fuck him. The harsh language earned a gasp from Inko. Izuku never swore, or at least never in front of her. Taking a chance to pull her close to him again. I haven't seen him since I was 4, that was over a decade ago, all because he couldn't accept who I was. I stopped caring about what he thought once I was old enough to realize that staying up late to sit by the door hoping he came home was never going to happen. He made his choice, I am making mine. I am going to be the world's greatest hero, not despite him, but because I want to show everyone that I am worth it, that I am not a Deku, that there is nothing wrong with me. His voice grows in octaves as he gives his speech. I am going to be the best, so don't worry about me. His grip is tightening. You are the best mom in the world, and I love you so much, you made me the young man I am today, and I couldn't be happier. Any protesting Inko had to try and reassure her son and try to help assuage the emotional breakdown were stymied in her mind as her son's declaration was filled with such power and vigor that it wasn't her comforting him, but the reverse, after a decade of lies and misdirection. She had told her son that his biological father wanted nothing to do with him just because of the one thing that always gave him trouble, and he didn't give a damn. He had done it, become a man before her eyes, before she even knew it. She had been proud that Izuku had saved his friend's life, proud that he stood by the conviction to learn and make his dreams come true. There were no words to explain how proud she was now. So, she did the only thing that could and pulled him into the tightest, most bone-crushing hug she had ever given. It wasn't until an hour later when their tears stopped, their legs having given out 20 minutes prior. She wiped her puffy red eyes. Do you still want me to try and call him? She was sure she knew the answer, but she had to check. No, he'll know what he missed when I debut in the city, Japan, the whole world. I am going to make sure everyone knows who I am. Helping her to her feet. Wow, crying together feels so much better than crying alone. Definitely my favorite way to cry. Haha, Izuku. Suddenly she was crying tears of joy, and it felt good. Let's order out to celebrate, to good times, and a greater future. Yeah, let's do that. Class 1A, where is it? A mop of green hair ran down the halls reading the signs posted above gigantic doors. How does anyone get anywhere in this place? 1C, great. I've passed the sign 3 times now. Carelessly running down the halls, Izuku came to a sudden stop after colliding with another person. Rubbing his head, ow, sorry. I wasn't paying attention, getting up and offering his hand to another person. A slap was all that met his grip, and the person was getting up on their own. Seriously, watch where you are going. The boy met his gaze. I know. Izuku began rubbing the back of his neck, a habit he had been unable to break. I just got lost. 3rd time I ran down this hall. Gaining an incredulous look that someone could be so lost in such a simple building. I just can't seem to find 1A. This only earned a pointed finger, left, right, and walked away. Turning to bow, thank you very much, and the green-haired boy took off running again. Only thought left in the stranger was how fast the smaller boy was. Until he began walking in the same direction. Tired eyes closed to stave off the sleep he wanted. Standing outside the door, which seemed larger, not that it was, but standing outside it to make a good impression was something he desperately wanted to do. He wasn't sure if he should enter with some grand declaration or a giant cloud of smoke, but he didn't want to be seen as plain. Unfortunately, all thoughts of trying to impress went out the window as he heard a sound he had become quite accustomed to. Kachin was in the room and was about 3 insults away from maiming a student. Izuku had taken some time and realized the best way to measure time was by how many insults he would spew before he got violent, so Izuku knew he really only had about 10 seconds before the fire brigade and SWAT had to come and wrangle his friend. Kachin, please don't blow anything up on your first day. Izuku pleaded while entering. TCH, fuck you, I'll blow up whatever I want to. However, he did stop himself from immolating his deck. For some reason the blue-haired boy from the exam was in front of his desk, scolding Bakugo. This offered an explanation as to the mood Katsuki was in this soon into the morning. Taking in the sight of his different classmates, some desks empty as Midoriya wanted to be early to not be late in case he had gotten lost as he had. He obviously knew Kachin, the blue-haired boy took the combat exam with him, something about him reminded him of the pro-hero Ingenium. There was another boy he recognized with the bicolored hair, except this time from the front, he could see a nasty scar that adorned the left side of his face. He didn't want to be rude and stare, but didn't want to look away like he was disgusted, so he slowly began scanning the room to see who else had made it into the class. A tall girl with a long dark ponytail was also seated in a desk next to the bicolored boy. At getting a good look at her, his only thought at the moment was, big. She had some of the largest breasts he had ever seen, not counting Mount Lady, since proportion matters, he's not an animal. But he knew he would get in trouble if he stared too long, so as he was going to look away, he made eye contact with the girl. Growing a faint blush, she waved to him, and this caused his own far more vibrant blush to cover his cheeks, and he could only give a small wave in return. The multi-limbed boy in the mask was standing by the window talking to the bird-headed boy. Another blonde boy was talking to a floating school uniform, so he became aware that the invisible girl had managed to pass, and this boy with a tail was getting to know her. The frog-like girl was also sitting in a desk, like a frog, and again, as the opportunity to actually take in the features of everyone around him, he could see she was very cute. Recognizing him from the story he was telling the last time they had met, she waddled over to him. "Hero, it's good to see you again. I'm Tsuyu Asui, call me Tsu." Her tongue poked in between her lips. So cute was the only thought he could muster. I'm Izuku Izuria Midyuku exhaling, understanding there was no way to salvage this. I'm Izuku Midoriya. If you want me to call you TS Tsu, even saying her name made him feel dirty, like it was a violation of the natural order to call a girl, a cute one no less, by her name. Then call me, Izuku, it's only fair. From the combat exam, you were the only one to beat the instructor, weren't you? A voice came behind him. It seemed the blue-haired boy had gotten bored of talking to the brick wall that was Katsuki. However, this boy seemed to have trouble with speaking in a reasonable volume, so it seemed everyone heard this. Finding himself under the gaze of everyone, he did what he had always done, shrink and panic. It wasn't like that. He began stammering. Whatever, everyone was asleep at the end, so who knows what the nerds scored. Came Bakugo's angry tone to the notion that Izuku had done better on the exam than him. What are you talking about, you delinquent? The postings for the exams were on the notice board. Midoriya-san had the passing score in the practical, 5th in the written, which puts him at the top of the class. He began waving his arm around. His practical is the only one with a pass on it. Everyone else had time or a percentage score for their tasks. So he is the only one to meet every expectation. This caused Iida to return to berating Bakugo's attitude, so he failed to properly introduce himself. Instead, some of the other students came over to introduce themselves. I'm Tokoyami Fumikage. I was unsure about the validity of your story during the writing, but since you have the skills to last at least 60 seconds against a pro, it seems to err towards the truth that you in fact have experience against villains. Tokoyami's statement earned a gasp from some of the other students who hadn't heard Izuku's tale. Todoroki's eyebrow raised. Even he couldn't claim to have fought villains, his father, but the law says he is a hero, so it apparently doesn't count. As other students began filing into the class, more of them wondering why one student seemed to have attracted most of the attention, are instead either joining that group or watching in morbid curiosity that two boys were seconds away from coming to blows over feet on a desk. This made it so a purple-haired boy found it easy to slip in the class without notice. The slam on the desk drew everyone's attention, and what looked like a giant caterpillar had begun its rampage of solving the city's homeless problem, a face peeking out of a giant sleeping bag. It took you all almost 10 seconds to quiet down. Get to your seats, and pray I don't expel all of you like I did to last year's class. This got everyone into their assigned seat in record time, as no one wanted to be expelled or be responsible for everyone else getting expelled. Talk about a fast way to make enemies. Now, I had originally planned to make you go outside and run laps to determine the weak link and expel that person, but the principal has made it mandatory that all first years attend the orientation, as the information might actually be useful this time. So after that you get to meet the other teachers, go be their problem, I'm taking a nap. This explanation left no one with a positive impression of their homeroom teacher. How could someone so lazy and judgmental possibly be a fair instructor if he would just expel them for annoying him? But nonetheless, they all got up to head to the auditorium, meeting the 1B students along the way. Seeing familiar locks of orange hair, Izuku politely pushed himself through the crowd to greet the young lady he had relied on, Kendo-san. He cried out. Oh, Midoriya-san. Itsuka turned and slowed her pace. It's so good to see you. After everyone woke up from Midnight Sensei's quirk you were already gone, but I saw on the notice board that you passed top of the class already. Ribbing him a little, sure knows how to make a first impression on a girl. She got the desired result as Izuku's cheeks turned a contrasting pink to his normal complexion. But it wasn't that cool, he deflected. Are you kidding? You were the coolest, catching her whip, and the way you were taunting her, she gushed, it was like you had done that a million times before. Well, I did practice my routine over the years. He tried to humbly accept the compliments. So you also practiced dancing, because that swordsmanship was incredible, she piled on, knowing it just teased him more and more. You were so good, you have to take me out dancing sometime. Yes, sure, I circa can do that, unaware of what he had just agreed to. Itsuka also realized she inadvertently asked him out while teasing him. Now it was her turn to be flustered. But later, after we get settled into classes, yeah. She noticed he nodded at that. Unsure of what to make of the boy who would stutter and trip over his words at compliments, but not understand when he just agreed to go on a date. However, they arrived at the auditorium before any more thought could be put into this discussion. They were again separated into their classes, and Izuku ended up sitting next to the ponytail girl. Realizing he was next to another beauty, he tried to stammer out an introduction. Hi, I'm only to be cut off. Izuku Midoriya, or do you prefer the other two names you shared instead? She giggled to him, flushing his face even more. I'm Momoyaoi Rozu, it's a pleasure to meet you. Extending her hand to him. He took it in his. Her thoughts were on how tough his hand felt, but also how gentle his grip was. Izuku, however, had short-circuited and began mumming, so soft, and such a cute laugh. Why are pretty girls talking to me so much? This never happened before. Unaware that Momo was one of the few people who was able to process a lot of information at one time, so she could understand everything he was saying, her blush overcame her face as she received numerous compliments from the strange young man holding her hand. Suddenly aware that she was still holding his hand, she quickly let go, which pulled Izuku out of this trance, as he realized that the pressure was gone. Momo felt saddened for some reason that the warmth was gone from her grip, but the principal took the stage on a podium that could only be described as doll-sized. He tapped the microphone and began. Hello, and welcome first-year students to UA High. I am the principal Nezu. Behind me are the staff members that will be teaching you in your first year at this academy. There are a few announcements that need to be made. There seemed to be much confusion from other year students and alumni from the changes that I have implemented for the new year. So, to help clear up confusion, I have a presentation. This received some nods from the students, and also from a few of the teachers, as well as the principal was surprisingly tight-lipped as to what motivated him to bring such sweeping and widespread changes to their structure and curriculum. Pulling a remote from a breast pocket on his little suit, he pressed a button causing a screen to descend from the ceiling. The same button also started a projector. A third press caused a video to play. Some students questioned how one button controlled all this, but since the remote was just a gray block with a single large red button, no one questioned it for too long. They have seen enough cartoons for that to ever make sense. The video, however, had everyone's attention as the sounds of fire, explosions, and screaming were suddenly resounding off the walls of the spacious auditorium. Izuku froze at the acknowledgement of what this was. It was a closed-circuit feed of a camera that had caught the fated second encounter with the slime villain. Everyone watched in horror as the villain caused considerable damage to the alleyway. They all saw as the villain used a head of blonde hair trapped in its clutches to cause fires and destroy property. A very angry growl was heard from the back of the room. No one turned to look as they watched a head of green hair run in. A girl screamed as she recognized who that was. Turning her head to stare intently at Izuku, this disruption caused many of the teachers and other students to look at him as well, making him incredibly self-conscious as people began to piece together what this implied. Momo gripped Izuku's hand and squeezed it tightly on reaction to the frightening imagery of a desperate Izuku using his quirk on the villain and struggling to pull Katsuki free. They could see the fear and pain in his eyes, even from the distance the camera was at. A few more screams as they watched Katsuki's fist careen at speed they didn't think were possible for a fist to move towards Izuku's head. Itsuka had shut her eyes to not see the impending doom of a person she had just been staring at. Momo's fingers had begun to dig into Izuku's flesh as she had never seen something so scary in her life. Until a laugh broke it all. I am here. All Might's sudden voice brought more relief to the room than they thought possible. The sudden shift in the video as the force from the wind generated by his punch sent the camera's view skyward as they watched clouds form and begin raining. A roaring cheer from the student and even a few teachers began clapping as they realized everything was fine. The video feed is cut out. The principal turned back to the student populace. Now who wants to tell me what was wrong with that video? Quiet murmuring from the students as they tried to understand what he meant. It's alright, I'll explain. While young Midoriya's, he gestured, only serving to make him feel even smaller, actions were nothing short of heroic. There were 4 other heroes at the scene, conveniently leaving out All Might being in his small form just off the camera's view, and yet a young man, who it came to our attention, had been previously attacked by this same villain not even an hour before, was the only one to act. All the heroes present were graduates at one time or another of this very school. It shamed me greatly to see so many heroes just standing around and waiting for someone else to, as they told me, with a better quirk, to solve this problem. His small form and normally stoic face seemed larger and more menacing. He continued his monologue. I had originally planned to seek action against those heroes and make sure they had extra training, but then I realized this was partially my fault. I re-examined what we were teaching the students and came to the conclusion that the structure of the curriculum suited putting graduates in a class that taught them how to use their quirk in a specific manner. Taking a sip of tea to soothe his throat, I then met with the boards and faculty to devise a new structure that would prepare the students to better handle more diverse situations, and after some more persistent faculty requested, the entrance exam for the hero course was redone completely. It was unfair that fighting robots left those whose quirks not suited for direct combat left behind, and we potentially lost out on amazing young children who can do more than fight mindless machines. Azal was straightened up at the acknowledgement that he had gotten the principal to cave to his demand. He also got a stern talking to about weaponizing his colleagues for the sole purpose of annoying someone. It took weeks, but using All Might to serve him a nice hot cup of tea, which was neither nice, hot nor even tea, was what broke him. Sure, he had a mountain of fresh paperwork to do, but seeing the rodent come into his office, disheveled, and stammering about that mountainous oaf being forbidden from using a kettle was worth it. As such, we also looked at the way we structured the school as a financial institution. It was made aware that the prestige of the school was enough that people could come from all over the country, and even a few other countries, to just attend. So we devised a dormitory system to assist those whose finances or travel time would be a hindrance to their education. This is to allow students to focus on their education, and not on if they are being a burden to anyone. This was brought up rather fiercely by our newest, but surely most prestigious faculty member as a requirement of his hiring, who I will introduce now. Making a motion to the door, please give a warm welcome to it is me, All Might, our new teacher. You talked over me, Nezu hissed, covering the microphone with his hand. Sorry, I got my care on. All Might said, crouched to the floor so he was eye level with the principal. Everyone could hear what was being said, but knew to pretend they weren't. Momo heard a second hiss and realized she had Izuku's hand in a death grip. I'm so sorry, I mean Midoriya-kun, Midoriya-san. Letting go, he reflexively massaged a hand to try and get blood flowing into it again. It's fine, Yaoi Rozu-san, it must have been scary to watch. He said, making eye contact and beaming a smile at her. Anytime you get scared, I'll be there to make it go away. I promise. Again, unaware of what he was doing to these young women. This declaration only caused her to blush profusely. Izuku, unaware that a few other students had seen the interaction and heard what he had said, he was marked as an enemy for numerous reasons. The students who were at the combat exam remembering him and Midnight Sensei's interaction are now fuming that he was making moves on more beautiful women. While those two were caught up in their moment, a certain orange-haired girl was conflicted. She was watching the exchange between Izuku and this new girl, taking in her everything. She felt very self-conscious. This girl was gorgeous, had soft features, perfect complexion, and a very generous endowment. It made her feel small, ugly, and not worth it if someone like this was pursuing Izuku. The only solace was that she wouldn't have to see their exchange for very long before this assembly was over, as she felt her face burning. After a discussion on how dorms would be provided and that forms had already been sent home, the principal started on some new rules. Sexual harassment policy, grading, and a brief introduction into the different ways the class would interact. No longer are the classes so nebulous and closed off. Both 1A and 1B would be doing joint training, with the support and business courses overseeing on a regular basis to better learn the different students' quirks to suit the next generation of heroes. As the classes headed back to their homerooms, Izuku pushed through the crowd to catch up to Itsuka. She either didn't hear him calling for her or chose not to slow down, so, while he could get in trouble for using his quirk without permission, he did slip into a doorway and out one further ahead to cut off Itsuka. Kendo-san, I wanted to talk to you. Izuku began, not noticing the hurt in her eyes. I wanted to say I'm sorry. It wasn't fair for you to see that. Itsuki was stopped suddenly. The other students began filing around the pair. I know it was frightening to see that video, and I'm sorry if that scared you. Itsuka puffed out her cheeks. That isn't what I'm upset about. She pushed him back and stormed off into her classroom. Kendo-san. He walked into the door. I'm sorry, I don't know what I did wrong, please tell me. I'll try to help. The door opened, and the homeroom teacher, Vlad King, stared down at him. Go to your homeroom, runt. The firmness in the voice made Izuku step back, but he wasn't a coward anymore, at least not a complete one. Just tell Kendo-san, I'm sorry, I don't know what I did wrong, and I didn't mean to hurt her. Izuku stared right back into the larger man's eyes. He didn't move from his spot until the door was shut in his face. As he slowly walked away, the inside of the room he left was eerily quiet. Itsuka was on the other side of the wall and heard Izuku confess. Instead, whispers from some of the students. This started the spread of rumors about Izuku that would take quite some time to settle down, all because one blonde boy enjoys making people suffer. As Izuku entered his classroom, he was barely aware that he had come in late, despite being ahead of everyone else, and that everyone had their eyes on him. Midoriya-san, take your seat, we are beginning introductions. So that each of you at least knows the bare minimum of the other 19 students who will be with you for the next 3 years, or until you get expelled. as the students started to introduce themselves. It went around the room until it came back to Izuku. Standing up, he cleared his throat. My name is Izuku Midoriya. As you all saw, I kind of started a bit of a ruckus. This got a few chuckles from the students, and I am a magician. If a few chuckles were all he got for starting a revolution at the greatest school in the country. Claiming to have magical powers sent most of the entire class into an uproar of laughter that Izawa couldn't settle down. Surprisingly, the only people not laughing at that declaration were Bakugo, Yaoi Rozu, and Todoroki. They either had seen it firsthand, or had enough presence of mind to know that someone who was able to do what they had seen wouldn't be making such a bold claim if he couldn't back it up. Settle down, Izawa, now regretting taking in the one student who clearly is going to be a problem to every person he meets. Now if everyone has gotten that out of their system, we can continue. He had a few glances his way as the other students introduced themselves. Until a tired-looking boy with purple hair stood up. My name is Hitachi Shinso, and my quirk is brainwash. Anyone that responds to me, I can control them to do whatever I want. He stood waiting for the response he usually gets. Don't brainwash me, I bet you could do a lot of perverted stuff with that. Don't only villains have mind control? Except the first thing he heard was, that's so badass. Blinking in surprise, he turned to the person who said what he never heard. It came from the resident magician. Before he could even question, he was assaulted by a verbal storm. You could end hostage situations when they list their demands. People in a panic in need of rescue become docile enough to transport. Someone couldn't even lie to you if you told them not to. You could investigate crimes and get witness statements from anyone. This caught the entire class off guard, except for Kitsuki, who had aimed his book at Izuku's head. The blow knocked him out of his mind. Ow, Kachin, that hurt. What did I tell you about doing that to every loser who has a loser quirk you meet? This comment did not go unnoticed by anyone. Bakugo didn't respect anyone. But why a book? Because you'll make my shoe disappear if I throw it like last time. True. Izawa having enough of this exchange, Bakugo detention for throwing school property. Izuku, don't do whatever that was again, or at least wait until I don't have to see it. Shinso sat down. Introductions are over. Go to lunch. The first day was going well for most students. Izuku had forgotten what he could have done to hurt Itsuka until he saw her hair. He pushed himself through the crowd, clearing a path that he didn't realize that a few others were following him down. Endo-san, wait, please, can I share lunch? Have lunch with you? His habit of making himself small as possible when nervous, doing double duty to make him look as cute and innocent as possible. For some reason she couldn't explain, she acquiesced to his request. After she had grabbed her food from Lunkrish, she found Izuku waving to her from a table in the corner. She sat down, and before she could utter a word, Izuku began profusely apologize. I'm so sorry, I don't know what I did to make you mad, but I'll do whatever it takes to make it up to you. I don't want to lose the first real friend I ever made. Please, I'm sorry. Itsuka could only sit stunned as she stared at the young boy, who looked on the verge of tears. Thinking to herself, first real friend, how does a kid this nice have no friends? But no friends, what about that other girl he was holding hands with? Realizing she had to calm him down before she could do anything. Midoriya-san, I have no intention of stopping being your friend, and to be fair, I may have overreacted. I might have misunderstood when you were holding that other pretty girl's hand. I shouldn't be jealous of your girlfriend. A second passed. Then another. Finally, everything started clicking in Izuku's head. Girlfriend? No, Yaoi Rozu-san isn't my girlfriend. I was holding her hand because she got scared, and I apologize because it was me in the video scaring her. So I promised that if she got scared again, I would do what I could to make her feel safe. Izuku started speaking faster, trying to explain himself. Sure, she's pretty, and I wouldn't mind dating her, but you're pretty too, and really nice, and I would like to date you too. Began, in the way that only an anime protagonist can do it, confessed to two girls at the same time without being aware of it. He froze as he realized that at some point during the conversation Momo had sat down to his left and was now stunned at the sudden confession that he had interest in not one, but two girls. At some point all the blood in Izuku's face had abandoned their job of supplying blood to his brain and decided to start sending it to his legs in preparation to run very far and very fast. Until everything came crashing down as the two beauties began to laugh together, holding on to each other for support. Izuku slumped into his seat, emotionally drained over his confession. Momo was the first to regain composure. Oh Izuku, it's sweet that you think we are so stunning that you want to confess to us this soon, and it certainly helps that you have a way with words that makes a girl swoon, but we barely know each other. Let's get settled into classes before we start anything with anyone. How about that? Izuku could only nod as his brain refused to allow his body to begin speaking for the remainder of lunch. So Momo and Itsuka spent the time comparing how introductions went in each class and what they thought of the changes brought about by their third's behavior. How the different entrance exams were, Momo explained that for the utility exam she applied for, she had to demonstrate the versatility of the object she could create, and Itsuka demonstrated her quirk and shared what it was like to fight a pro hero. They chatted. And Itsuka shared what it was like to watch Izuku use his quirk, and like he wasn't even there, she described how cute he looked in his magician's outfit and how handsome and cool he was when he dueled Midnight Sensei. Not one of them noticed that someone with blonde hair had been extending an ear out to catch their conversation. It's so useful that during lunch nobody bothers to check who's bumping into who. It's a veritable smorgasbord of quirks for me to pick from. How best to use this? The troublemaker called Monoma schemed. As the lunch period was ending, Izuku excused himself to the bathroom. He needed some space from the two beauties to clear his head, and the bathroom would allow him to cool down and splash some water on his face. This left the two girls alone to discuss something important. Itsuka asked first, "You have a crush on Izuku too, don't you?" Momo, blushing, nodded. "He's so gentle, and I truly believed him when he said he would keep me safe. No one has ever said something like that to me. So, I am crushing hard." "You?" Itsuka covered her face with her hands. They had grown giant in her nervousness. He calmed me down when I was freaking out at the exam. I was ready to just run out, damn the consequences, but he noticed and put on a smile and made me feel like it was okay. Aoi Rozu, I want to date him, but I don't want to put him in a position where he has to choose. I don't want feelings hurt or anything. Itsuka, me either, but I don't know if I can be okay with him dating another girl at the same time. How about, we just try to be friends first, before we decide if we want to get into a relationship with him or anybody. I think I could do that, maybe I'll grow into the idea or maybe we find someone else. It's probably for the best that we don't rush into this, we're two young beautiful ladies, and we have 3 years at this school, so it's fine to take some time. The bell rang signifying that the period was over. Unknown to them, the ear had pulled itself into the body, and a smirk. "I can use this," whispered the boy. The rest of the day went by in a daze for Izuku. He was so confused that he had not only confessed to one girl, but two, and they were both stunning, and he didn't get rejected outright. What brought him out of it was that Kachin kept drawing his attention if he zoned out for too long. So he was mentally there to hear that All Might was going to hold the first joint class exercise tomorrow between 1A and 1B. He hoped to talk to All Might since he had last seen him before the exam day, but he had been very busy with getting situated into the new school as a teacher. So maybe after school he could get him to come by and answer some questions, not all of them school related. But he was emboldened, even if he didn't seem so to the casual observer. Izuku had made not one, but 2 friends today, so he was over the moon with excitement and couldn't wait to talk to his mother about his great first day. Thanks for watching this video. Part 2 is over. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the playlist that I have created and enjoy. Link is in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.